If you're looking to pick up Total War Warhammer 1 and want to get the best deal, you can use my affiliate link in the description to get the game plus the Norska race and the Chaos race for 75% cheaper than on Steam, and greatly support the channel in the process. Hello and welcome to my review for Total War Warhammer 2's Curse of the Vampire Coast DLC. This DLC released on the 8th of November 2018, it was developed by Creative Assembly and it's published by Sega. The Vampire Coast is what's known as a race pack, similar in price and scope to the Rise of the Tomb Kings DLC from early 2018. Now for a top level introduction, the Vampire Coast arrives with 4 new legendary lords, each with their own unique starting positions, their own unique skill trees, quest battles and abilities. The race has a total of 39 units available to recruit, 8 of which are regiments of renown and around half of which are variations on the new and existing units. Finally, there's also a new lore of magic exclusive to the DLC, the Lore of the Deep. The Vampire Coasts are playable in both the Eye of the Vortex campaign and in the Mortal Empires campaign, but this review will focus primarily on the Vortex campaign, as this is a DLC review for Warhammer 2, and you need to purchase Warhammer 1 and 2 to play Mortal Empires. Now for those who do own both, the Vampire Coast have the exact same mechanics in both campaigns, but their starting positions vary a little bit differently, and so too does their starting diplomacy, and there's no final battle in Mortal Empires. Now before we get into the campaign mechanics, I'll quickly outline the differences between the 4 legendary lords. First we have Luther Harkon. Luther is an interesting character because when searching ancient Lizardmen ruins, his mind was shattered and his connection to the winds of magic was severed. Now what this means is that he has revolving traits where his personality shifts, and so too does his abilities every few turns on the campaign. His quest battle aims to re-establish his lost connection and piece his mind back together. It's quite a cool subplot for a playthrough, I think. As a lord, he is a combined range and melee lord and eventually can mount a Terrorgeist later on, so he's quite powerful. Count Noctilus, known as the leader of the Dread Fleet, is a more traditional pirate type playthrough, with a new starting position on the map right in the center, poised to take on any faction. He's got buffs to large units, making him a devastating late game force who can turtle relatively untouched in the beginning. Aranessa Saltspite rules the Pirates of Sartosa in the east, and as a result she has some basic Sartosan infantry available to recruit early on. She gets a bonus to raiding and sacking and also finds more treasure, and starting on an isolated island, it makes her a good candidate for a rule the waves type playthrough, never really needing to occupy much land. Lastly, Silostra Direfin starts a little bit more in the north and has a unique Bretonnian hero character at her disposal. She benefits from vampiric corruption more so than others, so she seems to play out a little bit more landlocked than the others. She also has a quest to, get this, get a fan that increases her cooldown of abilities, which I mean honestly is actually quite funny. Now normally I do outline the victory conditions and the objectives first, but this time I'm going to be focusing on the mechanics that the Vampire Coast provides, so that we can then better understand the victory objectives later. The Vampire Coast share a lot of mechanics with other races in the Total War Warhammer franchise, but they expand upon them in different ways. First off, there's a hybrid kind of horde system at play. This is something we have seen with Chaos, but here, only your legendary lord acts as a horde, allowing them to build buildings, recruit units, and gain buffs anywhere in the world, on land or at sea. This is to represent their flagship and the pirate crew that grow on it, allowing for the expansion of the ship and the improvement of it. There's 12 building chains in the horde buildings alone, so there's quite a lot to manage and improve over time. They really are like a moving city, and I think it does give a great feeling of army progression over time. Only the legendary lord can do this, and then through technologies you can get up to 4 famous admirals that can also have their own flagships. These lords can still take and occupy settlements too if they wish, so they really have the best of both worlds. The Vampire Coast also have their own version of loyalty. This is taken from the Dark Elves and Skaven, whereby loyalty will deteriorate over time and a lord could rebel against you. The difference here with the Vampire Coast lords is that to improve loyalty, you have to appease the lord's starting trait. For instance, a plunderer will be more loyal if you raid and sack settlements, and an instigator gains loyalty from fighting other pirate lords. It's a pretty minor thing, but I really liked that loyalty was more personal to the character, and not just a generic thing that you have to do for all characters. It just lets you get a little bit more familiar with them. However, there's only 5 different types of trait though, so once you get 6 or 7 lords, they start to feel a little bit less personal. On the subject of characters, the Vampire Coast have their own version of an offices screen, similar to the Empire. There's 8 slots you can assign lords to that will give your faction overall benefits in pretty much every area possible. It requires them to be at least level 5 for most. It also requires that they have at least 5 loyalty before you can assign them, but if their loyalty drops while in the position, it's fine. This can be kind of gamed a bit. In the technology tree, there's a technology that gives you a level 5 lord on recruitment. So you can just recruit 5 lords and assign them all those positions and get all the benefits. If their loyalty wavers and they rebel, you just kill a lord with no army and recruit another instant level 5 to get the benefits. More lords is more expensive, but once you're about midway through the game, you can easily populate all the slots in the offices screen and still get benefits without really caring about them. It feels like maybe if loyalty dropped below 5 while they were in the position, that should maybe kick them out. Then you might actually have to manage and care about who you put where. The Vampire Coast also spread vampiric corruption around them, which causes attrition to enemies but damages public order if you don't have it. Sort of like one of those culture mechanics from the previous games. It's a bit of a tedious mechanic when expanding, but the Vampire Coast admirals have new buildings that spread huge amounts of corruption, so it is actually pretty fast spreading here. And in a way, it also encourages you to stay out at sea, where there is no corruption to manage, which is a good thing. The Vampire Coast have 4 rights, just like all the other Warhammer 2 races, the first of which is an income buff right, granting instant money that scales the more income buildings you have. The second is similar to the Tomb King's Sandstorm, whereby a fog covers all of your territory, damaging anyone who enters and immunizing your armies from it. It's something we've seen before, but it is a great defensive right. The third is a loyalty buff to all your lords and a general kind of public order rise across your lands. The fourth grants recruitment of the Queen Bess artillery unit, of which there's only one allowed, and a global replenishment rate. These rights, they're all really par for the course, really. I mean, nothing stood out to me as feeling particularly new or innovative. It was also strangely absent of anything associated with pirates. You know, there's nothing to do with the sea. I think a boon to movement at sea, maybe the ability to create storms, or just anything while at sea would have been kind of useful and on theme. The Vampire Coast have something sort of new called the Pieces of 8. This is where 8 armies roam the map, and defeating them grants you a Regiment of Renown. Now I say it's sort of new because it is similar to the 8 Books of Nagash from the Tomb Kings, where 8 armies roamed the map or were in towns and killing them granted a bonus. It's pretty straightforward, but the armies in question range from weak to very strong, and they're the same famous admirals listed in the Infamy leaderboard, which we'll touch on later. All of the mechanics discussed thus far are something that we've already kind of seen in the Warhammer franchise in some shape or form, but something brand new is the new treasure maps mechanic. Sometimes when completing a mission or finding a treasure, you'll be given a map to a new treasure. This will draw a ring on the map and give you a kind of a clue where the treasure is buried. The clues are fairly easy to solve, but nonetheless quite fun, requiring you to observe the terrain features of the campaign and dig for treasure in the hopes that you've got the location right. Digging for treasure is a new ability, and all heroes and lords can do it. If successful, they'll uncover some items, money, and maybe a map to a new treasure to continue the hunt. They'll also level up and gain XP. This was my favorite mechanic in the DLC. The Warhammer 2 map is so rich and detailed, it got me to spin the camera around and look all around the worlds for the items in question. I just think it was a brilliant distraction that gave me some nice rewards and kept me incentivized to keep doing it. Another new mechanic is the ability to set up pirate coves. A pirate cove allows you to build a special 1-slot settlement on top of a foreign port settlement without them knowing it's there. You can do this with agents at any time, or with lords after you defeat a garrison. You can then specialize the cove to either focus on spreading corruption, giving you income and research, or earn 50% of the settlement's income, giving you a major economic boost. Essentially, this is how the Vampire Coasts are supposed to earn their money. Your agents should scour the world looking for major port settlements that earn a lot of money, then you pay a flat amount to build a cove, and boom, you're earning half their income without even affecting them. Coves are only destroyed if a city is razed, and unless it's spreading corruption, the owner is not affected by it. They don't lose income, they don't lose relations or anything, so there's really no problem with doing it even to an ally. It might honestly be a little bit too powerful, because if you do target a few capital cities early on, you can earn huge amounts of gold. Either way, I enjoyed the cove mechanic because it's just fun to explore the world and find settlements, and as someone who takes long breaks away from this game, I don't remember where everything is, so it's nice to discover the world again and find the best earning settlements. Now lastly, it's worth mentioning the technology tree. Personally, I think it's one of the most boring in the franchise. You essentially just choose what you want when you want. It is nice to be able to have the freedom to get anything at any time, but the fun of a good tech tree is making tough choices by kind of committing to a path and then deciding to stick with it or not and shift your playstyle to maybe suit the path that you've gone down. The most interesting part of it was that you could spend infamy to get a famous admiral, but you could just do that whenever you wanted. I loved the Tomb King's tech tree. That had famous Tomb Kings at the head of these dynasties, and progression down each one increased your research time, so you had to think about which one you wanted to open up. And you know, it could have been maybe a little less linear, but throwing it all out and letting people just pick anything really made me disinterested in the tree. And as mentioned, you could get the rank 5 lord thing at any time and assign all the offices as early as you want that way. It's just strange. That's it for the major mechanics for the Vampire Coast race on the campaign. There is also infamy, which we'll talk about in the next section, but to wrap up the mechanics at play here, essentially for me, the new additions like treasures and coves, those were a lot of fun to explore and play with, as was the hybrid horde for your admirals. That all felt pretty new and interesting, whereas loyalty, corruption, rights, offices, and even the pieces of 8, that kind of all felt like recycled material. I mean, it was okay, don't get me wrong, but I just couldn't help but feel like I'd done it all before, which did make it get old much more quickly. The Vampire Coast don't participate in the race for the Vortex, instead they have their own agenda. The Great Vortex has awoken a beast known as a Meerworm from beneath Ulthuan. The Meerworm, named Aminar, will periodically attack coastal port settlements and sea regions, damaging and killing fleets. Your goal as the Vampire Coast race is to summon Aminar by reciting a magical sea shanty and defeat him in a final battle. To do this, you'll need all 3 verses of the shanty and a magical harpoon capable of killing the beast. That sets the stage for your campaign and your objectives. Tied to your objectives is a new resource called Infamy. Infamy is earned through completing missions, claiming settlements, and establishing pirate coves. Now, Infamy is tracked on a sort of leaderboard, and there's 14 pirate names on the board, and these are real pirate fleets that roam the oceans, most of which will reward you with a regiment of renown if you beat them. They'll often wage war with you, but unless you're traveling by sea, they won't actually attack. If you do attack and beat them, you'll get a bit more infamy, but you can largely ignore them if you want. 3 of the names on the leaderboard possess one of the sea shanties you need for victory. However, these fleets do not roam the campaign map. Once you've earned enough infamy to take their spot, they'll come racing towards you looking for a fight, and if you beat them, you get one of the sea shanties that you need. Now I want you to remember that the armies will come for you, not you go to them. I'll be mentioning that later. The other objective was to get the harpoon. This was kinda weird. The harpoon is owned by a fleet that, for me at least, never moves and isn't very strong. The object itself has no special attribute after you get it, and it doesn't seem to exchange hands, so you can't lose it and other fleets can't steal it. So basically, it's just an objective to fight a relatively medium-sized army. That's it. Once you've defeated the army, then you're good to go. Now the reason it's weird is because the game describes the harpoon as something that all the pirates are supposed to be fighting over. They all want it to defeat or to control Aminar. But this doesn't seem to have any truth to it in the campaign. I was expecting the other legendary lords, you know, to kind of sail out and try to take it, and it'd be something I would have to track them down and fight over. But instead it just sits in one spot, and I just think it was a real missed opportunity. It was very strange. Those are essentially the objectives throughout your campaign. For me at least, I think they never encouraged you to actually fight at sea, which is a huge problem. Now while I love the idea of the infamy leaderboard, I never once fought any of the pirates on it. And the ones that you actually need to fight, you know, the 3 that I had to fight, ended up coming to me and fighting me on land. I think in total I fought 4 battles at sea, and 3 of them were on the same map because it was just near the same location. To me, it just seems like a big wasted opportunity. Here you have famous pirates roaming the oceans, the ability to build moving cities at sea, treasures at sea, events that spawn merchants and other seafaring factions, but you have no actual reason to do any of that other than just trying to create your own fun. I'm sure people will say that they had fun doing it, but every campaign I played, I got bogged down in wars on land. Even when I was trying to embrace the pirate life, I didn't want to be on land, but I just kept getting roped in. I really think that if the harpoon item moved around more dynamically, and fighting other pirates was your only means of gathering infamy, the campaign would be way more fun. you would have to venture out to sea. The objectives wouldn't be static. Wars with other pirate nations could happen. I wish the approach to the Vampire Coast encouraged you to be out at sea, where fighting inland only allowed you maybe to sack or raise, and fighting on the coasts only allowed you to set up coves or take the major cities for trade. I just don't know why they have the ability to even occupy land. They're not good at fighting on land, really, and it removes the whole point of the shipbuilding and infamy stuff. Like I said, I constantly got bogged down and I just didn't want to. The AI dragged more and more factions into war and made me fight for settlements, and the mission objectives required me to keep fighting inland. It kept telling me to take occupy settlements, raise or sack settlements, attack and defeat this army at land. It just felt so backwards when that happened. But whenever I did venture out and embrace the sea, fight island battles and loot treasures and set up coves, it was great. It just rarely happened in any of my campaigns. I played with Luther Harkin, who has an automatic negative 100 relations with Lizardmen, and borders 3 Lizardmen factions. My entire campaign was fighting here and on the coastline. I never waged a war, I always defended, and peace never lasted more than 10 turns or so. Eventually, infamy just ticked up from the victories, and admirals came to me with their shanties, and I triggered the final battle and I won. As Aranessa, I lowered the difficulty to see if the AI would just let me be. But the mission objectives and the diplomacy started me at war with some High Elves and asked me to occupy land in Ulthuan. Once I did, almost all the High Elf factions attacked me, and probably rightfully so, and I began just to get bogged down again. It seems to me that Noctilus, starting out on a remote island, has the best chance at actually playing how the Vampire Coast seems to have been designed, at sea, but for me, predominantly playing as Luther and Aranessa, it was a frustrating experience wanting to be at sea but never getting the chance to. The Vampire Coast roster is predominantly made up of various types of gunner infantry and large monstrous creatures. Almost all the units are undead in some way, and have the crumbling mechanic that you'll find amongst other undead units, but they also possess the aquatic trait, which allows them to move faster and fight better in shallow water. Now it's tough to find maps like this, but swamplands and I would imagine island fights have some water on them. As mentioned, I only fought 4 island battles on 2 island maps and there was no water on them, so I don't know if island maps don't have them or if I just got unlucky. It's also anecdotal, but I actually never saw a map with water on it, so I never got to use that trait in 3 of my campaigns, so that's just me. Now the playstyle of the roster is one that is extremely weak early on, with a serious lack of melee infantry, but an increased focus on range and armor penetration. Fighting the Lizardmen can be particularly tough, as they will pretty much cut down any unit you have early on, so you just need to have a big enough gap and deploy a solid line of gunners to thin them out considerably before they engage. When they do engage, you want to then send in your monstrous infantry into the flanks, primarily to cut them up. Later on you'll start getting some tanky units like the Rotting Prometheans, and they have the Defender trait, meaning that they can take a lot of damage while your missiles shred the bogged down enemy. Now one of the spells from the Lore of the Deep can actually spawn one of these units, which is great for tying down enemies, and it looks amazing when you do it. The playstyle, broadly speaking, is a bit different than most others, favouring range incredibly, but more so static range than hit and run tactics. In many ways, they play a lot like the dwarfs in that regard. They're slow, with good artillery pieces, infantry lines, and flying units to pepper infantry from above. Where they differ is, as mentioned, in their infantry. They rely much more on heavy monstrous creatures, and their late game monsters are huge towering behemoths on the battlefield. The Necrofex Colossus, a sort of animated ship hull, will point blank blast opponents in melee, and snipe faraway targets at range. The Rotting Leviathan is a large lumbering lobster with a ship hull for a shell, and several undead zombies kind of clamber around its mast, firing in all directions. It's a powerhouse of a unit, and it's primarily intended, I think, to tank damage, terrorize units, and kill a few in the process. Another noteworthy unit is the Bloated Corpse, a one-time use unit. It sluggishly barrels towards enemies with a brief charge before detonating itself in a rotten explosion. It's a really fun unit, and it's a must-have for dealing with large numbers or in tight spaces. Now, even though I'm not personally a fan of ranged playstyles, just because of my preference, I really loved the look and feel of the units. The pirate undead have their own animations. They're not kind of like all in sync like other vampire nations. They stagger around almost drunkenly when they stand in place. The deck gunners have large two-handed Gatling type guns with crewmates who carry ammo in a box. Setting up a couple lines of those on high ground felt extremely satisfying to snipe out large creatures, enemy lords or thick masses of troops, especially on bridges. It feels just so good to use them. The Depth Guard, the only decent melee infantry, could possibly be my favorite looking infantry in the game, period. In contrast to their undead brothers, they stand poised to fight, proud and eager, laced with armor covering their entire bodies. There's no doubt about the quality of models and animations is at an all-time high, and the VFX for the spells as well are some of the best looking yet, with rolling waves, ghost ships that kind of materialize out of the ground, and mini krakens all wreaking havoc on the battlefield. Apart from a couple of reused units that every race seems to have, the roster really is top-notch and exudes quality. They haven't skimped on the regiments of renown either. While some are just slight recolors and retouches, others have had complete changes to their appearance and functionalities. The smoldering Necrofex flamethrower and the ghastly Depth Guard being particular standouts. And then there's the units like Queen Bess, which are entirely unique, and oh my god, is she powerful. Spoilers ahead for the final battle in the Vortex campaign. I just wanted to quickly touch on it, but if you don't want it spoiled, then skip to the time on screen now. This is the best battle I think I've ever had in Warhammer. The environment is the most creative and technically impressive thing I've ever seen this team pull off. You're underwater in a sort of underground cavern created by a magical force, pushing water apart and creating water walls surrounding you from all sides. There's sunken ships broken up on rock formations, sparkling crystals, deep caverns, waterfalls, shimmering sands with water reflecting from above, fish swimming around casting shadows down below, and not to mention a fucking fully modeled Armar swimming around and poking his head out to spew bile onto the map every now and then. It's extremely impressive detail that it didn't need to be done, you know. This is unbelievably creative situation that poses quite a technical challenge, I would imagine. That they didn't have to do that. It could have just been another island fight, and there was no need to detail and model Armar. So it's extremely impressive detail and effort that has gone into it, and it really shows. It's the best battle environment Creative Assembly have ever put together in a Total War game. Not only that, but the battle itself is extremely fun. It took me a few attempts to beat it, but it was never tedious. It was like constant feeling of, oh, I hope there isn't another wave, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and it just kept beating me down until I had nothing left. It was so much fun, and for me in particular, it just felt perfectly balanced for my playstyle and the army I brought with me to fight it. Now, it was just one battle, but it left a hell of an impression on me. The end of the campaign after that slightly undermined it. In a pretty impressive cutscene, Armar is shot with the harpoon and slayed, becoming an undead slave to your faction. No longer will he hurt you or cause you issues, but just everyone else, as he did before. This sounds alright, but in none of my 300 turns in this campaign across different lords did I ever once get attacked by Armar. I mean, I often saw the message that he was attacking somewhere, but I don't know what that means really. I mean, it just never happened to me. Or if it did, I didn't even notice it. I really wish I could have maybe used him as a right to actually target sea regions or something like that. It just felt like nothing to me when I got it. Oh hey, that thing that never bothered you? Well, it's not going to bother you now. Campaign 1. It's like, okay. The Vampire Coast really are a mixed bag for me. And while I love the aesthetic and the units, and for the first time I actually cared about the lore of Luther and putting his mind back together, I just can't say I enjoyed the campaign. I was always bogged down fighting one or two races for the entire game. As Luther, I fought the Lizardmen and High Elves, nobody else, ever. No Skaven, no Tomb Kings, Greenskins, or anything. Nothing. I mean, that's a real problem when your game has so many diverse races and you basically fight just two of them. Now, even when starting a third campaign fresh, lowering the difficulty just so the AI might give me a break and let me embrace the ocean more, I just always got dragged back into doing stuff I didn't want to do, and ignoring, as a result, some of the most interesting features like shipbuilding and infamy. It's such a shame because I think some people will have that great experience and have a great pirate campaign, and then there will be others like me that might get unlucky or literally cannot even make it happen, where you kind of go out to sea more. I'm sure some people may watch this review and think, well, you played it wrong. But if the game let me play it that way, and I was just following the objectives and I won the game, there's something wrong with the game. It's not up to me to create my own fun and go out of my way to do it, even though I tried. It's up to the game to only give me fun options to play. There shouldn't be a wrong way to do it. And I do want to stress, I really didn't try to play a non-fun way. I tried hard multiple times to play to the mechanics of the DLC. My first playthrough was actually awful, but I don't even count that. I just did really bad, so I will throw that one aside. So if you were there watching that first one, didn't count. Now ultimately, this repetition of fighting the same races and getting bogged down has really hindered my impressions of the DLC, and unfortunately it's something I just don't feel has a lot of replay value for me, especially now after beating it. Anyway guys, that is it for my review. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you agree with the score by voting in the YouTube cards on screen now. I always find that it's a nice way to see if I'm alone in my thoughts or if other people understand where I'm coming from and maybe even feel the same way. Plus, it gives you an idea of what other people think too. Now, unfortunately as well, I don't receive early access from Creative Assembly, so my Total War content is always just a little bit late. But if you appreciate the review and want me to continue doing them, please consider leaving a little extra support with a like or a comment on the video, and maybe share it with someone you think would be interested. It really does help. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.